So this is the follow-up to the first video I made, so go watch that to understand everything for this video, but I will give a little rundown here. I will look at a few pieces of media that I want turned into a movie or series and identify a few things about the media that makes me want to adapt it and why I want it to be adapted. I will also discuss any potential issues with adapting this project. So, let's get started. So, Creative Assembly, the masterminds behind the Total War franchise, created a series of games based off the high fantasy level of Warhammer, meaning there aren't space marines, but there are the four chaos gods and man-sized rats and lizards fighting against elves and men. So, why do I want this adapted? Because it's fun, and there is tons of lore and story to be adapted here, focusing on individual species or factions, delving into the story behind the world, such as the Great Vortex, the things to do with the Chaos Gods, the individual stories and lore behind individual factions like the Empire and the High Elves and Kislev, for example, and just having fun with what you can depict and explore and branching out in many different ways. So a series works best for any angle. A movie I don't think could quite capture the scale, fantasy, and sheer madness of these games. I mean, you have rats with Gatling guns. That is the level of craziness we're dealing with here. And there is so much content that a dozen series could be made about this. So I think a series is going to be what works best for this. There is a lot of content here, so choosing carefully what is adapted and what lore you use is important, and part of the problem is that there is too much lore. So it would take a lot of deliberation to create a series that encapsulates everything about this series without delving too far in any different direction that it just feels like disconnected and that you haven't gone too deep. There's a lot. So you would have to choose carefully what you want to adapt so that you can really get the most out of it. This one is a sandbox game set in a fantasy world with several warring kingdoms that is really about the player and less about the story. And this is the element that makes me want an adaptation because you can craft your own story, you have the world, you have the setting and part of the lore. Now you just need a character or characters to play it out. And the other thing about this is you have a community of people who have crafted their own stories. So you have a way to create a really interesting and unique medieval series with a ton of community involvement. And there is so much to do with it, and I think that's part of it. It's like you're being given a canvas that you can craft your own stories with, and I really like that idea. A movie would be an interesting take. I think it could work, especially if it was something like Lord of the Rings. But a series would also do well, maybe to better include the infinite well of characters and all of the various different sort of ways you can go. The same problem occurs in that there is a lot of potential, but it can become very easy to break that potential if you have too many characters or do not present the world properly. Okay, I swear this is the last video game. For Honor was a small game that mostly had its focus in typical multiplayer battlefields, but it's the story mode I want to focus on, with 3 acts focusing on 3 distinct groups: knights, Vikings, and samurai. 3 very popular groups across tons of media, and it tells the story of a world ravaged by war at the behest of Apollyon, who wants everyone to fight each other for reasons. So, why do I want this adapted? Because it is hella cool. I mean, the story is mode is so interesting and just fun. Is it wrong to have fun with stuff like this, especially with a concept as cool as knights, samurai, and Vikings all fighting each other? Who doesn't want to see that? Who hasn't imagined that? And a TV series, simple as that. It is a little simplistic, and you would have to get the nuances and the various classes. And I haven't actually played this one; just watched people play it and watched all the cutscenes, so I have a limited knowledge as to how it should be appropriately adapted. But hey, it's cool, so that's good enough for me. So for those of you who haven't read this, Bone is a series of quirky and incredibly well drawn graphic novels and a group of 3 bones that are the group of people who, after a noodle incident in their hometown, end up in a larger mysterious fantasy world and are drawn into the conflict of this fantasy world. The thing I remember about reading the series was how unique its fantasy world was. There are dragons, but they are mysterious and do not appear much in the story. They are talking bugs, giant lions, rat monsters, and the villain is called the Locust King. So all of it is just fascinating and unique to the point where I have no idea why, in the almost 30 years since this series was released, it hasn't been adapted. If I were to if I were to adapt it, it would be a TV show. I think it works best. These stories kind of go on for a while, and making it animated would also work best to reflect the art style. There is it's such a good story, and it's just well crafted, and it looks amazing, and it's so unique that I really think it could do well and break up the monotony of fantasy that we tend to get. I already planned to make a larger video on this, but to give a rundown, Champions was a series of comics in which Miss Marvel gathers teen heroes from Miles Morales to Amadeus Cho to become the champions of the people, protecting them in a more supportive way than the Avengers are doing. This is my favorite Marvel comic, mostly because of the fact that when I was reading it, I was nearing that age, so it was even more relatable, and I am a sucker for anything Young Avengers related. There are other reasons, but the longer video will talk about it more. I'll get to it, there's just a lot of things to make at the moment. A series is the only way I can see this comic being adapted because of both the style of the comics and to give time for the team to gel in a way that makes them work. You need time for the chemistry to form. You can't just throw them in and hope that the sort of audience will fill in the blanks. You need to work at it. This one has a very special place in my heart as it was the first book I truly fell in love with, and it is a strong connection to my time in Australia. The book details five children living in a city after a massive flood and surviving on the skills of the two leaders, Griffin and Isabella. Not only is this a good dystopia, it's a good found family story with all the kids working together and even taking in a new member. Another thing I like is Griffin, the awesome nerd character, is appreciated for his skills despite his lack of confidence. And back when I first read it, I found it incredibly endearing and relatable, so of course I want something like this adapted. A series or movie, though I would lean towards series due to my love-hate relationship with book-to-movie adaptations. This is another story close to my heart as it is my favorite book of all time, and will continue to be. A fairly simple but well-executed mystery set in Australia about a young boy called Ben and his sister who are dragged from their lives by their parents who are acting incredibly suspicious. Spend the book trying to escape this and find out the mystery whilst Ben grows as a character. It is my favorite book, and of course I want it adapted, but outside of that, it's a unique mystery that is something different from the genre as a whole, and with the perspective of a kid and the family and the setting of somewhere in countryside Australia, and all of the processes that they go through, all the environments and the tension that they use, it's all joined together to create a damn intriguing mystery series. I will say no more. A series, not a movie. You need time to make this series what it is, and you can't do that with a movie. You need time to build the mystery. You need time to develop the characters. And a movie, even multiple, does not give you that. So, yeah, if I come up with more, which is entirely possible, I will make another one. But until then, these are the products that I want adapted the most. These are the ones that, if I had to choose anything, would be these. So, any current or aspiring directors looking for a new project, take a look. I would be happy to help you make them.